such as feeling sad, empty, or tearful. This can happen even in children and teens. That's one of them. Depressed mood, feeling sad, empty, tearful. Second one, significantly reduced interest or feeling no pleasure in all or most activities. Significant weight loss when not dieting. Insomnia or increased desire to sleep. Either restlessness or slowed behavior that can be observed by others. Fatigue or loss of energy. Feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt. Now just think about that one right there. What do you know about that? What do you know, church, about feelings of worthlessness? Where does that come from? We know one source of it very well. And the scriptures have a lot to say about that. But this is one of the official symptoms from that list of how you can be diagnosed as someone with major depressive disorder. Excessive or inappropriate guilt. What do you know about that? You know a lot about that. And you know who and how our guilt can be removed and taken away. And these are effective tools of Jesus that he's given us that we can use, and we can bless others in their struggle with these very symptoms. Trouble making decisions or trouble thinking or concentrating. That's important. Recurrent thoughts of death or suicide or a suicide attempt. So those are the symptoms. You have to have those for over 2-week period, most of the day, nearly every day, and you have to have at least 5 of those. Okay, now that's how they do it. And please hear me when I say this. I'm not trying to trivialize in any way what they're doing. All I'm saying is this is just a list of stuff that you probably have had one of these. Everybody in here has probably had one of these. You might have had 2 or 3. You might have even had 5 in the same week. And it's not to minimize and trivialize or say this is of no value. It's very good. We use these a lot of times, and sometimes just reading just straight out, just like I read to you, someone that you're counseling or care for or love can be a real help because they can say, somebody understands how I feel because they just described it really, really well. And so that's very useful, and I really appreciate it and want to use it in that respectful kind of way. But think about what this is not. This is not saying my wife goes and gets blood drawn so they can keep an eye on her thyroid level. That's not the same thing. Nowhere in here did anybody get poked with a needle. And that's not how you figure this stuff out. It's by you reporting, yes, this is how I feel. I feel sad. Yes, I have trouble making decisions. And you get 5 of these right, and it's happening for 2 weeks, 2 weeks or more, you're diagnosed with that. And that can be helpful. It can be encouraging. You might get medication, and that may help. And that's all good. It's a common grace blessing of God. But there are a whole lot of these things that the Lord himself has a lot to say, a lot to speak to. And so to just dismiss that would be a mistake on our part. It would be an advocating of our role as people of God who offer, what did the Old Testament people talk about? Shalom. Remember that word? Everybody knows that's the word for peace. Well, in Hebrew, that's a whole lot richer than just peace. It's a sense of well-being. It's a being connected in a community of the people of God where I feel loved and cared for, watched out for and protected, a sense of safety. That shalom is what the Lord's people offer as we go out into our community, as we meet and gather here to worship in our church, of a people of shalom, a people of God's well-being, of God's covering, of his protecting, of his grace, of his goodness and his mercy. And that's part of what we want to be, and that speaks to every one of these conditions, every one of them. So that's just kind of starting into this. You have these symptoms. Okay, I'm going to go right back to the article. However, clinical depression symptoms, even if severe, usually improve with psychological counseling, antidepressant medications, or a combination of the two. So that's good. There's some hope right here in this article. So counseling is a part of it. and sometimes a medication, right? So those are the two things that they would generally do. If you go to a psychiatrist and you're diagnosed with major depressive disorder, in most all cases that I know of, no insurance company that you have insurance coverage with is willing to pay $250 or $350 an hour for that guy to talk to you. So he's only going to talk with you, or she will only speak with you probably 15 minutes max. And we've been to a whole lot of these appointments in Georgia and in Pennsylvania, and it's the same all over. They prescribe medications. They talk with you long enough to be able to say, we need to adjust or change or do something different with your meds. And that's their role anymore. Hardly any of them would actually counsel people. But what they do is they also recommend that you go somewhere, you find some way to get help counseling. We can't, as church, people of God, prescribe medications. We got no business doing that. We can, as church, be a part of counseling people, a part of helping and encouraging people with these same symptoms that we just read. So that's a place for what they do, what the medical health system does, and a place for what the church can do. The people of God, the community of Shalom, that helps and gives peace and rest to those who are afflicted and struggling in these ways. And, according to the article, a combination of the two, the medication and the counseling, usually is helpful. So that's good news. That's very hopeful. Here's another one from Harvard University Medical School, their website. And so this is an article about what causes depression. This is where we'll get into a little more of these details, but it is often said that depression results from a chemical imbalance. You've probably heard that. Well, listen to what the Harvard research expert guy says about that. Research suggests that depression doesn't spring from simply having too much or too little of a certain brain chemical. So he's saying that's really not the best way to understand this. Rather, depression has many possible causes. Now, that would be the same for bipolar, for borderline, for ADHD, for ADD, all the rest of those. It would be the same for all of those. There are many possible causes in all of these cases. All of them. This depression is just one diagnosis, and it would be true for all of them, that there are many causes, including faulty mood regulation by the brain. So there is something going on in here. There really is something to that. And like what Lynn described from our daughter's struggles, there definitely was really something going on in there. That was a part of the cause. But what causes all of this? Well, that's part of it. Genetic vulnerability. And that's what we were talking about a minute ago. Stressful life events. What causes depression? Many factors, stressful life events, medications. Some medications actually cause you to be depressed. And medical problems. There are certain things, brain injury, stroke, there are different kinds of things that go on that can cause depression. So there are millions, listen to this, there are millions, even billions of chemical reactions that make up the dynamic system that is responsible for your mood, perceptions, and how you experience life. Billions of chemical reactions. It's not accurate to just go out there and say, oh, so-and-so has a chemical imbalance. That's not really accurate. That's a way that we've heard, at the street level, popular level, but from the actual real experts, it's not. That's from the medical health side of things, or mental health side. That's not a way to describe it. So one of the things that can cause it is the brain itself. Another thing, genes, genetic, hereditary. And that's what we mentioned a minute ago. If the genes get it wrong, they can alter your biology in a way that results in your mood becoming unstable. In a genetically vulnerable person, any stress, like a missed deadline at work or a medical illness, for example, can push this system off balance. But it's not just a fluctuating chemical, it's a whole system. Nerves, brain, hereditary factors, all of that affected by genes, which is just something you got when you were born from your parents. That's not something you did. So that means a part of this, a part of that experience, like Lynn was telling you about with our youngest daughter, that was not the result of something she did. So to say, if you just stop that, you're going to be okay, that would be a cruel, cruel thing to do. And that's not what Jesus is calling us to, and that is not how we apply the gospel to these kinds of struggles. So to accurately understand this stuff, I think, is helpful. And to get this expert, researched information from the actual medical world is very helpful to know. We don't have to know all the nuts and bolts of it, but just to be an awareness of that can go a long way in how you think about someone with that kind of struggle and how you speak to them. When the scriptures say, speaking the truth in love, speaking to one another in love, we grow up as a people of God. That ought to be a filter for how we speak in love to the person with this kind of struggle, which probably in part is just something in their genes. They were just literally born with that. Now, I'm not saying they were born that way, so they're just stuck over here and nothing will ever improve, nothing will ever change. If that were true, we would be wasting our time even doing this. So it's not that. It's not an excuse for sin, but it is something we need to be aware of to be able to understand, to love well that person with that struggle. So it can be genetic. This is really an interesting part too. Temperament shapes behavior. This is another thing that can cause it, is temperament. And listen to what he's talking about here. Genetics provide one perspective on how resilient you are in the face of difficult life events. So the way you handle stress, part of that you just inherited from your parents. When I was growing up, my mom is a very tough person. She still is. She's 77. She's just plain tough. And so she used to say to us, my brothers and me, when we were growing up, can't, never, could do. Can't, never, could do. And that told me I just need to work harder and I can do it. And that's the way she endured a horrible childhood and upbringing. She's just plain tough. And some people are inherit that, and they just kind of face life that way in kind of a more position of just resilient, which is what this guy's talking about and what that means. My mom's an example of that. Cognitive psychologists point out that your view, listen to this, your view of the world, in particular, your unacknowledged assumptions about how the world works also influence how you feel. Okay, this is people who study the brain, and they study psychology from the view of how the brain works, those chemicals, all those billions of nerve things happening. They study all that stuff, and this is what they come out and say. Your view of the world and your assumptions about how the world works influence how you believe. Do you think we have anything to say to that?